and the boundaries holding us apart. Africa must unite, yeah. We unite or we perish, yeah. Aye, Mama Africa, Africa muye. Aye, Mama Africa, now you want we get. Break down the borders, let us live together. We are one family, united forever. Aye, Mama Africa, Africa for Africans. For equality and growth in our continent, Africa, we don't need borders. For inclusiveness and sustainability, yeah, break all the borders. For meaningful contribution in creating the Africa we want, we don't need borders. To iron out our differences as a family, yeah, break all the borders. Africa for all Africa. Aye, Mama Africa, 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 yeah. Mama Africa. Aye, Mama Africa. Now you want we get. Africa, your name. Break down the borders. Let us live together. We are one family, united forever. Aye, Mama Africa, Africa for Africans. We want Africa without borders. Hey, yeah. Borderless Africa, Africa rising says. Let our people move, remove visa restrictions. Free movement of Africans in Africa. Ooh, borderless Africa. We want a borderless Africa. Hey, yeah. Mama Africa, 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 yeah. Mama Africa. Aye, Mama Africa. Now you want we get. Africa, your name. Break down the borders. Let us live together. We are one family, united forever. Aye, Mama Africa, Africa for Africans.
Thank you so much, Maurice, for that song. I think we can now start. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning from where you're joining us from. Hamjambo, Salam Aleikum, Kunjani, Dumelang for those who it's morning. Thank you so much for connecting from wherever you're connecting from. My name is Sandrosa Samba and I lead campaign and advocacy at Africans Rising, and I'll take this opportunity to welcome you all to today's book reading sessions and feminist dialogue. We're super excited to have you. Please feel free to connect with us on the chat and tell us where you're connecting us from. And I'm sending out my shout out to Bright Sadlisi, Kensani Motileni, Maureen Magak, and Regina Valerie, sending you all my shout outs and tell us what your expectations are. And once again, welcome to this conversation. So today is such a beautiful day, first of all, to be African, but very special day because we are just a few days into the African Women's Month, and I'm super excited for that because this is where we celebrate all women, and we're just finalizing the African Languages Week, which is quite significant within the continent because then we are giving prominence and priority to our African languages. And for us, this is very critical because then we are not just saying that we want reparations, but then we continue to have these conversations because they matter. We are making sure that people don't forget reparations. But I would like to allow my colleague Eunice to tell us why we're here and why this is important, and then we will go on. I have an amazing group of women today, African women. You know me. If you're seeing me for the first time, this is how I look. when I see so many women together in one space. Yay. Eunice, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Dada, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're watching us from. My name is Eunice Adhiambo Odhiambo. You can call me Malkia. Malkia is an African queen in Kiswahili. I work for Africans Rising as a reparations campaign officer. I work with Anne in the same department. So this week we were celebrating or commemorating the Africans Languages Week. And it would have been very unfair for us to conclude this without congregating as women and celebrating our role in teaching African languages, in conserving African languages, and of course in developing African languages. And we are connecting this to our reparative justice campaign. You all understand that women played a very, very big role in Africans' history. Women have been everywhere in the painful history of Africa, from the invasions and captivations. They have been there in the Middle Passage during the slave trade. They have been there in the farms, in the diaspora. They have been there in the anti-colonial liberations and everywhere. They have used all that they can use, to liberate Africa, to get us where we are. They played a very big role. I guess if there were no women, we would probably have forgotten everything about us. They were themselves captives, but they also took this opportunity sometimes to hide their children. Remember, every captive was born of a woman. So these were their children. You can imagine what they felt, even when they were themselves captives, even when they were themselves slaves. So this is not said enough. This is not talked about enough. So today, we are taking this opportunity at the climax of the African Languages Week to just honor women, to just celebrate women in the history of Africa, to look at what strategies were there, what strategies did women use. And for this, we are going to read a book by an African woman, Homegoing, that traces for us the historical events, of slavery up to where we are today. And then we will have a feminist discussion of these issues and try to break down some of the things that are abstract to people, because these things are not talked about enough. So we are taking this bold step to talk about this pain that we keep numbing, and just celebrate ourselves as part of the great history of Africa. So this is our last event in celebrating African Languages Week. This is the last event in celebrating the African Languages Week. And I welcome you all to this. I can talk on and on and on about this. Somebody's trying to talk to me. So I can talk on and on and on about this, but let me leave it here because we have a very good panel of readers and debaters and feminists who are going to talk to us about this. I would rather wait for that and continue talking. So thank you very much, Anne. I think I'll end up there for today.
Thank you so much, Eunice, for that. I think that's super critical. Maybe before we start, I would like to take this opportunity to start by honoring the women. So if you are online and you would like to join me in honoring the women, you can do the reaction icons. Yeah, you can click on whichever one works for you. So I'm gonna yeah, so sorry, I was reading Dume Biolo. I think you may have to log in and log out and log in again. So I would like to start this conversation by honoring the matriarchs under whose shoulder we stand. I start by my very own matriarch who is alive, my grandmother, Miss Jacinta Wanjiku. And I would like to honor the spirit of Sarah Batman. I would like to honor the spirit of Queen Jingabadi. I would like to honor the spirit of Princess Yenanga. I would like to honor the spirit of Mekatilili Wamenza. I would like to honor the spirit of Queen Quintu. I would like to honor the spirit of Nefertiti. I honor all the living and the old matriarchs who went before us. I honor all the young women who stand up and talk even when conversations are very difficult to speak about. I would like to honor all the women who are passing batons to us, like my own mother Wangari, who stood up against tribalism in a time when it was so difficult for them to speak. I would like to honor all the matriarchs in the continent who continue to fight and to speak. I would like to honor all the other matriarchs and sisters and feminist siblings who stand in the gap for other women, even in policy spaces. I would like to honor all the women who actually stand in male-dominated spaces. Thank you so much for joining me to honor them, because we have Women's Day to talk about women, but the way even it's put, it's very tokenistic. So every time we have this opportunity to honor the women within us, then we do have to honor them. And lastly, I would like to honor the women of Nder who refused slavery in Senegal and buried and like killed themselves in there in Senegal. And there's so many matriarchs that I could honor today, including the wife of Dedan Kimathi Mukami, including the wife of um, the um, the former president of Burkina Faso, Mariame Makeba, and so many, many, many women that we could not mention that you can honor and continue honoring in the chapters. Thank you so much once again, colleagues, families, sisters, for joining us to talk about this conversation that we've been talking about the whole of last year and the year before, and now it's a decade of reparation. For us, reparation goes beyond financials. Reparation should go beyond, all these things that we are talking about, to having like an intentional way of looking at how we were stripped of our identity, of our language, of our spirituality. We definitely need to understand the question of reparation as a power issue, because that's what it is. Because why are they always saying that Africa is a dark continent when we know very well that it's a dark continent, but our minerals are light? Hello? So that's one thing that I always look at and I'm like, wait, what are you trying to say? So we can't keep saying that we need to change the narrative. We have to reclaim our narrative right now. Um, and with that, I think I would like to invite us into this session. It's not a plenary, it's not a panel discussion, really. It's a space to invite all of us to think and reflect what our roles are in this struggle for reparations, but also what would duty and what mandate do we bear to continue telling the stories of those who went before us? Because I was never there when the women of Ndere were burning themselves. I was never there when my grandmother was fighting. I was never there, but I have a responsibility now to carry on the mantle and to say that, you know what, I was never there, but now we can do this. So I would like with that to say, today we are reading the book Homegoing. And why this book is important, it's because it set the context of today's subject, which is reparation and feminism as a case study, because it talks about the different violation that different people witnessed in the book, as you'll hear from the speakers. And that will invite us to reflect what are some of the things that we were so violated about and we refused to name. What are some of the things that we are forced to bury? I attended a webinar yesterday by Dr. Lebo Hang, and she was talking about reparation as a time issue, and time and reparation, and how deliberately, when it comes to reparations of Africa, it is very slow. And that was such a radical space, and I got out of there very healed. I think Petronilla attended that with me. It was super, super useful, and in terms of even how we frame our own reparation issues as a continent. One of the biggest things that puzzled me, I think in 2023, I visited the Red Indian Museum in Washington, D.C., and I was very I was very amazed at how documentation of the violation was so critical. Maybe those are some of the things that we could think of right now. But with that, allow me to call our first reader. Amazing. She's an avid reader. Oh my gosh. And she does all things books. If you thought I read, you've never met Farida Tialato. So Farida Tialato is an avid reader, and she hosts some amazing book sessions on her space. That's where I saw her. and she's going to be our first reader for the day. And Farida, you have the floor.
Hi, can
Hi.
you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you so much, Anne. Thank you, Eunice, for the introduction and for just getting us into the mood to have this discussion. I am an avid reader. You can find me on Instagram, and yeah, I think Instagram. I'm more active on Instagram as just another book club, and I'm so happy to be discussing this book and its relevance with all of you speakers and everybody who has joined. So sorry, I'm just trying to get my notes. Yeah, okay. So you'll see me looking for, to my tablet and my phone for the notes and also for the book reading, okay? Before we get into the book, on the chat, tell me how many of you have read the book, aside from the speakers. How many of you have read the book? And have you read the book? So I know what kind of crowd I'm dealing with. Do maybe saying he can't hear anything. Am I?
He was at the backstage, so I've just admitted him.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, so how many of you have read the book? Eunice, have you read the book?
Yes, I have.
Nice. From our guests, has anyone read the book? Okay, so I'm just going to get straight into it. Oh, Vivian says she hasn't read the book. So if you haven't read the book, after this discussion, I hope you get to read the book. It's going to make a lot of sense once we are done. And for those who haven't read the book, Homegoing is a multi-generational novel that traces the descendants of two half-sisters. One of two half-sisters from Ghana, one married to a British slave trader, and the other one was sold into slavery. So it traces it goes down 14 generations, and it discusses themes of memory, resistance, slavery, and all of this. And it's so important for us to have these discussions. And as we are celebrating African Language Week, the book is so important because how we write in Africa is very different from how other people write. And as an avid, oh, Christine Ogutu is saying I'm not audible. Am I audible, Eunice?
Yes, you
Yeah.
are. I think it could be a microphone.
Okay, so let me just put this a little bit closer.
You are audible. Let me sort Christine.
Sorry, Eunice?
I'm saying you're audible. Let me talk to Christine and see what her problem is.
Okay. Okay. That's a little bit closer. So as I was saying, the book traces the descendants of two half-sisters. One who was married by a British slave trader, and the other half-sister was shipped into slavery back into America. So it traces these two families, the descendants of these two women. And in Africa, I think even in science, it is the women who carry the genes down. Even though your blood is 99% your father, there are things that are passed down from the mother and they go down generations and so many generations. So we're going to look into those two descendants of Ephia and Essie and discuss the themes of memory, resistance, and reparations. Okay, so I'm just going to get into it. We're going to read the first page and introduce you guys to Ephia. Are you ready? Your books are open, those who have the book.
Yes, we're ready.
So the night Ephia Ocha was born into the musky heat of Fanteland, a fire raged through the woods just outside her father's compound. It moved quickly, tearing a path for days. It lived off the air. It slept in caves and hid in trees. It burned up and through, unconcerned with what wreckage it left behind, until it reached an Asante village. There it disappeared, becoming one with the night. Ephia's father, Kobe Ocha, left his first wife, Baba, with a new baby so that he might survive the damage to his yams, that most precious crop known far and wide to sustain families. Kobe had lost 7 yams, and he felt each loss as a blow to his own family. He knew then that the memory of the fire that burned, then fled, would haunt him, his children, and his children's children for as long as the line continued. When he came back into Baba's hut to find Ephia, the child of the night's fire, shrieking into the air, he looked at his wife and said, "We will never again speak of what happened today." The villagers began to say that the baby was born of the fire, that this was the reason Baba had no milk. Ephia was nursed by Kobe's second wife, who had just given birth to a son 3 months before. Ephia would not latch on, and when she did, her sharp gums would tear at the flesh around the woman's nipples until she became afraid to feed the baby. Because of this, Ephia grew thinner, skin on small bird-like bones, with a large black hole of a mouth that expelled a hungry cry which could be heard throughout the village. Even on the days Baba did her best to smother her, covering the baby's lips with the rough palm of her hand. "Love her," Kobe commanded, as though love were as simple an act as lifting food up from an iron plate and past one's lips. At night, Baba dreamed of leaving the baby in the dark forest so that the god Nyame could do with her as he pleased. We are introduced to Ephia. Ephia is the first daughter to later, when we found out that Baba is not her real mother, to Mame. And fire here is a theme that continues throughout the generations. We will come to find that fire plays a very important role in how, So fire becomes a very important theme throughout the story. As the generations to come, some of them are going to be afraid of fire. Fire is going to be a feature that, I'm having internet. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Sorry,
we can.
I'm having
Yes.
my internet is down.
We
Let
can
me
hear
try to
you.
connect my phone.
No, we can actually hear you.
Can hear you, yeah.
Okay, so okay. Okay, so from the time that Ephia is born, the night fire rages through and the forest, and her father fears that the memory of the fire will haunt the generations to come. So that fear becomes the novel's thesis. The fear is not just an event that happens in that night, it follows through the generations to come. So in this way, Gyasi establishes that trauma is not contained within a single lifetime, within a single event, it is inherited. Throughout the story, we have, I've forgotten his name, this guy who got his face burned. I'm sorry, I forgot his name. But fire becomes very phenomenal and it is passed down from generation to generation. It becomes memory, it becomes trauma, okay? And then Ephia is also one of the daughters who got married to the British governor, and she lives at the coast castle. So physically, she's above the dungeon where her sister is being kept before she's shipped into slavery. So The upper level, that is the Cape Castle. The Cape Coast Castle represents proximity to power, negotiated survival, and relative comfort. And then the lower level represents commodified bodies and suppressed suffering. Efia's life becomes a metaphor for the societies built in historical violence. Structures that appear stable and civilized above ground are sustained by brutality beneath. Yeah. So memory in this chapter is partial because it asks a question, a very disturbing question in this case. What does it mean to live above the dungeon, to live with power? Efia benefits from her position, but she's unaware that her sister is down there going through one of the worst times of her life. Yeah. And yeah, so that's what I can say about memory. Any question on that? Or any comment?
No, I actually have a candle. I was thinking, should I light it to symbolize that? Not for
Sorry?
anything.
Sorry?
No, I'm saying, can you hear me, Farida? No,
Yeah,
I'm
I can.
saying I don't have a question, but for our
Mhm.
viewers, I just lit this candle to symbolize the fire, not for anything. Yeah.
Yeah, fire is a theme that is very consistent in every person's story, especially in Efia's line. Fire is a consistent theme, and in S's line, water is a consistent theme. And they're all joined by a stone, which also carries memory throughout the generations. So yeah, the black stone pendant given by Mame to her daughters carries so the black stone carries memory throughout the descendants of Efia and Essie. So if we can quickly jump to Kiwi. Kiwi is the grandson to Efia, is it? James. James is Efia's son. Yeah. Then we have Kiwi, who's Efia's grandson. So Kiwi represents economic inheritance. And if we look into his story, if I can just read a paragraph from Kiwi. Let me go to Kiwi. Okay. So Kiwi's story is introducing us to conflict. He has conflict over taking after the slave trade. To him, it doesn't sit right. So Kiwi questions and actually doesn't want to be part of the slave trade anymore. So through Kiwi, okay, let me read the paragraph on Kiwi. So Kiwi is on page 56 to 57, and that's what we're going to read on Kiwi. Kiwi had received a message from his old friend Kujo and didn't know how he would answer it. That night, he pretended the heat was keeping him awake, an easy lie, for he was drenched in sweat. But then, when wasn't he sweating? It was so hot and humid in the bush that he felt like he was being slowly roasted for supper. He missed the castle, the breeze from the beach. Here in the village of his mother, Efia, sweat pooled in his ears, in his belly button, his skin itched, and he imagined mosquitoes crawling up his feet, to his legs, to his stomach, to rest at the watering hole of his navel. Did mosquitoes drink sweat, or was it only blood? Blood. He pictured the prisoners being brought into the cellars by the 10s and 20s, their hands and feet bound and bleeding. He wasn't made for this. He was supposed to have an easier life away from the workings of slavery. He was raised among the whites in Cape Coast, educated in England. He should still be in his office in the castle working as a writer. The junior officer rank that his father, James Collins, had secured for him before his death, locking numbers that he could pretend didn't represent people bought and sold. Instead, the castle's new governor has summoned him, sent him here to the bush. As you know by now, Kiwi, we've had a long-standing working relationship with Abiku Badu and the other Negroes of his villages. But of late, we've heard that they have begun trading with a few private companies. We would like to set up an outpost in the village that would act as a residence for a few of our employees, as a way of, say, gently reminding our friends that they have certain trade obligations to our company. You've been specially requested for the position, and given your parents' history with the village and given your comfort and familiarity with the language and local customs, we thought that you might be a particular asset to our company while there. Kiwi had nodded and accepted the position, because what else could he do? But inside he resisted. His comfort and familiarity with the local customs, his parents' history with the village. Kiwi was still in Efia's womb, and last time he or his mother had been there, so scared was she of Baba. That was in 1779, nearly 20 years ago. Baba had died in those years, and yet still they had stayed away. Kiwi felt his new job was a kind of punishment, and hadn't he be punished enough? So the last line that says, Kiwi felt his new job was kind of a punishment, and hadn't he been punished enough? So Kiwi is trying so hard. He's fighting with himself not to accept this job. From his own experience, it's clear that he's not willing to proceed with the slavery and with the slavery business, but because he's a descendant of a slave owner and a slave trader, he's taking up the business. This is economic inheritance, and he doesn't have any other job. He wishes that he would remain back in London, continue writing, or even at the Cape Coast Castle, continue writing and doing his own job other than being part of the slave trade. But he has no other choice but inherit this business. Yeah, so that's the economic inheritance from Kiwi. Even though he doesn't like to be a slave trader, he's unfortunately forced into it based on his descendancy. That's on Kiwi. And his final act of marrying the Asante's king daughter, or should I call her a princess, it's an act of an apology maybe, because she was brought in, and if he hadn't married her, probably she would be sent into slavery. And perhaps Kiwi was trying to salvage the situation and send like an apology somehow. So Kiwi does not want to be a slave trader, but he's forced into it because of his descendancy. The other person we're going to look at is James, or Kiwi is Efia's son. So Kiwi is the only child to Efia, and we're going to see what happens to his other descendants. Go into James. James is Kiwi's son and Efia's grandson. We're going to read an excerpt from James. That's on page 108. So on James' story, James introduces us to resistance to family expectations. James is introducing us to resistance to family expectations. So let's read an excerpt from page 108. Yeah. So James goes to I don't want to call her a witch doctor. James goes to a traditional healer, trying to solve a problem that really doesn't exist. He's really trying to find answers. So let's look into the conversation James has with the traditional healer, Mampanyin. I hope I have pronounced that correctly to the Ghanaians in the house. I'm sorry if I've murdered the name. James saw her on a Thursday. His father and many others had always called the woman a witch doctor, and she seemed to physically embody that role. She was missing all but her 4 front teeth, evenly spaced, as though they had chased all the other teeth out of her mouth and then joined together in the middle, triumphant. Her back was perpetually hunched forward, and she walked with a cane made out of a rich black wood, carved to look like a snake was coiled around it. One of her eyes always looked away, and try as hard as he might, moving his head this way and that, James could not convince that eye to greet him. What is this man doing here? Mampanyin asked the air. James cleared his throat, unsure if he should speak. Mampanyin spit on the ground, more phlegm than saliva. What does this man want with Mampanyin? Can he not leave her in peace, he who does not even believe in her powers? Auntie Mampanyin, I have come from my village at my wife's request. She would like me to take some herbs so that we can make a baby. He had rehearsed a speech on the journey there about how he wanted to make his wife happy while also making himself happy. But the words eluded him. He could hear the uncertainty, the fear in his voice, and he cursed himself for it. He called me auntie. He whose family sells our people to the whites abroad, he dares to call me auntie. So James goes ahead and says, that was my father and grandfather's work. It is not mine. He didn't add that because of their work, he didn't have to work, but instead he could live off the family name and power. So here on this line, we see that James is resisting the work, but also he's benefiting from the economic inheritance. He doesn't have to work because he's living off his family name and power. So it continues. Mampanyin says, she watched him with her good eye. In your mind, you call me a witch, eh? Everyone calls you witch. Tell me, is Mampanyin the one who lay down for a white man to open her legs? The white men might have left had they not tasted our women. The white man will stay until there's no more money to be made. So this is a really important line on why the slave trade had to be there. And even when it was abolished, they still were sending slaves illegally. Hey, now you speak of money. Mampanyin has already said she knows how your family makes money by sending your brothers and sisters over to Aborigine to be treated like animals. America is not the only place with slaves, James sighed quietly. He'd had his father say it to David before. So what does this begs the question, just because America is not the only place where slaves go, other places, let's say like the Arabs take slaves, does it mean that it's lawful and it's okay to be done? Yeah. James said quietly, he'd had his father say it to David before. When they talked about the atrocities of of the American South that he'd read about in the abolitionist British papers. The way they treat the slaves in America, my brother, David had said, it's unfathomable. We do not have slavery like that here, not like that. James' skin was starting to feel warm, but the sun had already dipped underneath the earth. So I do not want to work for my family. I don't want to be one with the British. So here we see James is trying to forge his way and trying to move away from the family business. She spit again and then focused her roving eye directly onto him, and he began to sweat. Once she had finished, her eye returned to its ambling, finally satisfied with what it had seen in him. Okay, to the kids in the room, sorry. Your penis does not work because you don't have to work. My medicine is only for those who want. You speak of what you don't want, but there's something you want. It was not a question. James didn't think he could trust her, and yet he knew that with her bad eye, she had seen him, really seen him, and since he had not been able to make the earth move on his own, he decided to trust the witch doctor to help him move it. So this is what James says. I want to leave my family and move to Asante land. I want to marry a Kosu or Mentha and work as a farmer or something small. Mampanyin laughed. The son of big man wants to live small, eh? So here we see James finally admitting to himself, finally saying it, that he wants to leave his family, or finally telling someone else, I want to leave my family and move to Asante land. I want to marry a Koso or Mentha and work as a farmer or something small. So he's resisting his family's slave trade business, and he wants to move to a different land, marry a girl from that land and work as a farmer. So he's giving away his economic inheritance, which we are going to later see that it's going to cause him tremendous loss because he doesn't end up being a successful farmer. Perhaps it's a curse from leaving the economic inheritance, leaving the slave trade. Perhaps it's a curse, but we don't know from the book. Yeah. So the story continues. She left him standing outside and went into her hut. So if we're not going to get into all the other bit, but here we see that James is resisting the family business and he's trying to make a life for himself away from Fante land. And with this resistance comes loss, because his farming, his land doesn't end up producing food and crops as he hoped it would be. He also struggles to get another child. He gets a child very late into his years. Yeah, so there was an effect for leaving the family business. Yeah, so this is Ephia's generation up to James. Yeah, any questions? Any questions, any comments, any additions, anything? You all are quiet. Is the chat room active? Anybody?
I think people are still internalizing.
Mm.
Do you guys have any questions for Farida before we bring in Brenda? And you can also write it on the chat box, but if you have a reflection or you agree with a page, then do tell us. If you raise your hand, I'll be able to see you. Go ahead, Eunice.
Okay. You see the way when you are in pain, there's this song that you play and you keep playing it until it touches your pain. That's what Farida kept doing to me.
Oh my God, sorry.
Yeah. I profess African spirituality, and it's not because I was born like that. I actually made my decision at the Cape Coast Castle. When I went into that chapel upstairs, and the guide was explaining to us that the parishioners would be here worshiping while the captives would be wailing, down in the dungeons. I asked myself many questions. The first thing I asked myself, I was an Anglican, that was an Anglican chapel. And I asked myself, what faith would be calm and quiet in the proximity of what was going on downstairs? The second thing I asked myself was, were the people in the dungeons and the people up in the chapel worshiping different gods? But what hurt me the most was the fact that the parishioners, the British parishioners upstairs, justified slavery and even the raping of women, because the soldiers, the governor, the men who are involved in this trade would just pick women from the dungeons and make them wash in the open sea and rape them and throw them back there. So that was very heartbreaking for me. And it was worse for me because I was the rapporteur, you know, of the summit, of the assembly then. So if you read that report, for instance, day one, you would get what I felt, because I wrote it with a lot of emotion and a lot of pain. Every word that I used to describe our trip there was really, really emotional and painful. You know, it came from deep down me. So this disturbed me until I had to, you know, I had to journey back to the, you know, to the spirituality of our ancestors. But that is the point, that is where I broke, you know, that is the place I denounced Anglicanism. Thank you.
So they used faith as a tool to justify their trade.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
And also
Farida, I think, oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, just ask your question, maybe I can just answer with it.
No,
Hello?
go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I was saying faith was used as a tool to devalue the Africans. If they didn't have faith, then if they weren't worshiping as they were worshiping, then their gods don't matter, you know? It doesn't matter to them, so they devalued them. In order for you to sell a human being like a product or a commodity, you have to really devalue them. Yeah, so they used faith as a tool. Yeah. Go ahead, Anne.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, yesterday we had a session with Dr. Lebohang and I think another amazing sister from Zimbabwe. And we were talking about the fact that colonialism was extractive because it extracted our minerals, it extracted our all the other things that belong to us. But then neoliberalism continued to extract our resources, our brains, and all these things. And so it's not stopping. And we really talked about so much on commodification of Africa. But there was one thing that the sister said that I think it still sits with me, is that Africa is the womb of the world. And the earlier we discover that, or we realize that, then we will also start looking at reparations from a point of time, because time is such an important factor in reparations. But even as Eunice was speaking, it took me to the book of Zena Badawi on Africa and my own study in Lamu, in Zanzibar, and in Paje, about how, unfortunately, communities that were participated to sell their own fellow Africans to the Arab slave trade, for example, continue to justify that. And what is sad for me is also acknowledging that maybe they were vulnerable, and that's why, and there's no amount of justification that can do that, but I'm just thinking the way patriarchy works structurally. If you look at that, you would know that maybe they were in no point of, you know, and all these are choices. But what hurts me the most is not that they sold their own black people to the Arabs, from Tipu Tipu to all the other slave traders in East Africa, but the fact that to date they continue to justify and profess not just the faith, but also the color. I think that's a conversation that a lot of people, Farida, you know, you're from the coast, we are not willing really to talk about. But I'd like to stop here so that we don't eat into Brenda's time. Yeah.
It's already 5 and we have 30 minutes.
And we still have Brenda and Ansel.
Okay.
But thank you so much.
Welcome.
Okay, if you do have questions, more questions for Farida, or comments or reflections or Eureka moments, like what Eunice and I have had, please do type on the chat box. Allow me to introduce to you Miss Brenda Wanjiru, also known as Dumebi Yolo. She convenes an amazing series of reparations conversations on LinkedIn. And she has a very good combination, I would say, and sometimes it's very difficult to introduce her because she's not just a legal mind, but she's also doing a lot of social anthropology and medicine on reparations, especially. So, Brenda, you have the floor to read to us one chapter, a paragraph, I don't know, and contextualize to us the next setting. And then Ms. Ansel Langwa, you will be next. And then, of course, we'll have the plenary led by Zamdina and myself. Brenda. No, we can't hear you. Okay. So as Brenda is preparing her mic, does anyone have a question? I also see new people who have joined. Yeah, please rejoin Brenda. And I would like to send out my special shout out to you, to Lisile Nobule Mazia, because you're always in all our webinars. Thank you so much. I would make a point of dropping by to say hi one of these fine days when I'm in Eswatini. Brenda, are you ready now? Okay. I'm trying to see if she is back. I think she'll be on the planned list. I don't know. I can't see her. Eunice, can you see Brenda? I think she tried to join and
I
then
can't see
rejoin
her either. Yeah, she's not in the backstage either.
Yeah. Okay, then I'm going to take an opportunity to send shout outs to the people I'm seeing. Yes, definitely. I want to come to Eswatini. Everybody knows that maybe I should have been a South African or somebody from the SADC region with instead of Kenyan, because my love for you people is just too much. I'm going to send a shout out to the other people who joined. Abongile and Hamisa, you're welcome. Abubakar, Sherry and Valerie. Petronila, you wanted to reflect? Petronila, your hand is up.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, because I was just reflecting on when Farida was talking about fire as a theme that flows through the book and Ipia's story. I kind of realized, like, to me, I feel like it's a symbol of trauma that she carries, but cannot really understand or trace because her history has been hidden from her. Remember this, it's only when you proceed that you get to understand the whole story about fire and also her mom and her sister. So I feel like that is like a powerful feminist insight that is being portrayed in the book when we are looking at it contemporary, because it's like in women inheriting wounds they have no language for, right? Because we are looking at it, if I'm looking at it currently, I'm like seeing something that looks like anxiety, it looks like self-sabotage.
Yeah.
It's also about difficult relationships and patterns of suffering that feel personal, but are actually historical and also structural. If I'm looking at it now in terms of what we are experiencing in our different countries, like even in Cameroon, I see communities that are affected by displacement, our generations of marginalization. And to me, it feels like this is some kind of unnamed fire, right? So it's also also shows a reflection of the absence of mental health resources within our countries, and even cultural spaces for grief. Yeah, so that was just what I was looking at, and then yeah, it kind of brings up.
Thank you so much, Petronilla. Like you've spoken into very critical issues, especially the cultural spaces for grief. And I would like to pick on a specific cultural practice that I see within the Western and coastal people of Kenya, which for me also I think was a shock the first time I experienced it. The way the African cultural setting for griefs are put are so different in a way that other cultures do not mourn people, they celebrate life. And because I feel like as a people, we've lost tolerance so that when other people are practicing their cultural grief processes, we don't respect them, and we want to bastardize the culture, we want to demonize the culture. Myself, I always have culture shock. When we went to Oyarife in Ghana I think it was last year with Eunice, and then we experienced a lot of culture shock, especially the rights of the burial rights where, for example, someone is given specific days of mourning, and then the way people are put on a billboard, which is different maybe from our context. Yeah, I think it was quite a shock, but like getting shocked, but still respecting that this is how people grieve. And I feel like some communities lost those cultures. Yesterday, I think I was talking about my own community. Uh, Half of me is Kikuyu. And so it's even people joke about it in Kenya that Kambas and Kikuyus fear dead bodies. And so you can tell how that cultural grieving space is really, really important. And not just the physical space, but even the emotional space and the intellectual space to understand that this is how a specific community grieves, and you must respect that even if you don't agree with the process itself, because we are different. And I think that's why diversity then becomes very, very critical. But thank you. I I don't know if I can find not Farida, sorry, Farida, why are you in my head? Brenda, because I don't know if we bring Ansel as we are waiting for Brenda.
Yeah, let's bring Ansel because of time.
Yeah, that's what I thought, but now the passages are anyway. Ansel, can we please have you? Then Brenda will come right after you because I think she's having challenges. If you could read for us just a paragraph of what you have and then contextualize it for us. Bienvenue, s'il vous plaît.
Okay, anyways, just because you were saying about how interlinked it is and then going and then coming back, I don't know if anyone can just directly check on her to find out what the challenge is. But
Yeah,
okay, I just need a few minutes to be ready because I was waiting for her.
Okay, as we are doing that, Eunice, do you want to call her directly? And thank you so much, because I see a lot of feedback on the chat. Abubakar is saying, this has been insightful. Sherry from Kenya has read the book. Sherry, can you share with us your reflections now that you've read the book? And the other chats are more of people saying where they are joining from. Kensani Motileni says, hi, all joining from South Africa. Eunice Olela says, greetings, joining from Kenya. Of course, I know Bright says he hasn't read the book. Vivian Namwalo says he hasn't read the book as well. So yeah. Sherry, do you want to share your thoughts on the book, on the part that Farida just read? I can try and send you the microphone. Let me look for you. Where is Sherry? I've allowed you to speak. Go ahead. Sherry, you have the mic actually. Ask speaker to unmute. No, okay. I think I clicked on the wrong person. Do you want to talk and share your own insights? The rest of you, have you read the book? because I think it really helps. Yeah. Thank you, Maureen, for that. Maureen says, Pan-African greetings. This is Maureen Magak, feeling all powered. Yeah, thank you, Maureen. Oh my God. So Brenda is saying her internet is quite slow. So Ansel, you just have to come at this point so that we save on time. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. All right.
Okay, as Ansel is coming, I think Abongile says I read the book about 2 years back, planning to read again. Yay, we can't wait. I read the book, I think last year. I'm also still thinking. I think I should read it again after this conversation. Ansel, are you ready now?
Yes, yes. I'm just going to get started in like
Okay.
1 minute, please. Just want to put my notes together and then I can start.
In reply to Abongile, this is my first time reading the book. From my reading space, people had said this book is so traumatizing before. So I was trying to not read this book. You know, there are people say books are traumatizing and you don't want to be traumatized again because books can actually leave you so traumatized. But when Anne reached out and was like, we're reading this book and we want you guys to have a discussion about it. And I was like, yeah, let me read it finally. And now more than ever, I feel it's so important to read these books, to read about our history, even though it is historical fiction, it has been put in a way that captures the actual events that happened. So it's really important for all of us to read and reread and share it with everybody else. So if you haven't read the book, please read it.
Wait.
Thank you so much, Farida. Ansel, can you please take it? I think after you, we will have Brenda. I have asked her to join without the video if that stabilizes her internet.
All right, sure. I'm going to get started now. Sorry, I also have a couple of kids in this house that are not making my life easy, but that's okay. So I'm going to be reading or at least sharing about Sonny, and to understand. Oh, let me turn on my video. Oh, great. So to understand Sonny, what we have to understand is a man that is simply tired of losing. He's an activist in the 1960s. He has been beaten, he has gone to jail, and only to look around and see that his neighborhood is still full of riches and poverty.
Ansel, it's okay. We understand. Working, okay. Okay, okay, Brenda, are you able to speak then without the video now that as Ansel is sorting her kids?
Oh, sorry.
Are you?
Sorry, I'm telling you, it's crazy. They just came back from school, so there's a lot of distraction. All right, so as I was saying, I'm talking about, I'll be reading the part of Sonny. And to understand Sonny, we have to understand where a man that is simply tired of losing. He's an activist in the 1960s who has marched, has been beaten, has gone to jail, and only for him to look around and see that his neighborhood is still full of, the cockroaches, poverty. So he starts out as someone who is trying to save his people, as an activist, but he ends up just trying to save himself from the pain of feeling helpless. So So it is at that moment that his spirit begins to break. So I'm going to read, I'm going to make it quite short. I'll read a part of it, and then I'll just summarize the key things that come out of that. Sonny. Jail gave Sonny time to read. He used the hours before his mother bailed him out to thumb through the souls of black folk. He'll read it 4 times already, and he still wasn't tired of it. It reaffirmed for him the purpose of his being there, on an iron bench, in an iron cell. Every time he felt the futility of his work for the NAC. He would finger the well-worn pages of that book, and it would strengthen his resolve. Ain't you tired of this? Willie said, when she stormed through the doors of the police station. She was holding her tattered coat in one hand and a broom in the other. She had been cleaning houses on the Upper East Side for as long as Sonny could remember, and she didn't trust the brooms white people kept around, so she always brought her own, carrying it from the subway station to subway station, to street house to street house. When he was a teenager, that broom used to embarrass Sonny no end, seeing his mother lock it around like it was a cross. If she held it on the days she called his name while he played with his friends on the basketball, he would deny her like Peter. I mean, the reference here to Peter is like how in the Bible, Peter denied Jesus. So he would deny his mother when she would call him. And Carson, she would yell. And he answered her with silence. He would think that he was justified in not responding, for he had long since gone by the name Sonny. He would let her call out, Carson, a few more times before he finally said, what? He knew he would pay for it when he got back home. He knew his mother would bring out her Bible and start shouting over him, but he did it anyway. Sonny took up the souls of black folk while the officer opened the door. He nodded at the other men who had been arrested during the march and brushed past his mother. How many times they got to throw you in jail, huh? Willie called after him, but Sonny kept walking. It wasn't like he hadn't asked himself the same thing 100 times or more. How many times could he pick himself up off the dirty floor of a jail cell? How many hours could he spend marching? How many bruises could he collect from the police? How many letters to the mayor, governor, president could he send? How many more days would it take to get something to change? And when it changed, would it change? Would America be any different, or would it be mostly the same? For Sonny, the problem with America wasn't segregation, but the fact that you could not, in fact, segregate. Sonny had been trying to get away from white people for as long as he could remember. But big as this country was, there was nowhere to go. Not even Harlem, where white folks owned just about everything an eye could see or hand could touch. What Sonny wanted was Africa. Marcus Garvey had been onto something. Liberia and Sierra Leone, those 2 efforts had been a good thing, in theory at least. The problem was that in practice, things didn't work the way they did in theory. The practice of segregation still meant that Sonny had to see white people sitting at the front of every bus he took, that he got called boy by every snot-nosed white kid inside. The practice of segregation meant that he had to feel his separateness as inequality, and that was what he could not take. So I just wanted to start with that introduction that gives us a little bit of context into who this man is, who Sonny is. And the first thing I would like to say is that this story, the story of Sonny, starts with one thing: the activist losing hope. He was an activist in the 1950s and 60s, but he's constantly arrested for marching, for protest. And like it was explained in the beginning, he was always reading Webb Du Bois' book, The Souls of Black Folk. And he even mentioned that he has read that book about 4 times, but he was still reasoning. However, his work on the housing team begins to break his spirit. He sees the horrific conditions, the rats, the roaches, extreme poverty, and realizes that despite the letters, you know, the several letters that he has sent to president, his arrest, the police beating him, nothing is changing. And then there was a turning point. The young boy, the turning point for him was a young boy in a tenement that looked at Sonia and asked, "You can't do a single thing, can you?" I think this particular words, this phrase from this young boy is what haunted Tony. It was that moment that haunted him, because when he was asked this question, "You can't do a single thing, can you?" he realized that in America, you cannot truly segregate because white power owns everything, even in Harlem, as was described. So he felt very helpless and eventually quit the NAACP. That was where he worked as an activist. And the second thing is the cycle of absence. In the cycle of absence, we're talking about how Sonny struggles with his identity. Just in those opening words, and I was happy that I read them, you would hear Willie. Willie being mentioned there is Sonny's mother, and should refer to him as Carson. But he insists on the name Sonny. He did not like the name Carson. So it turns out Sonny is the name that his very absent father gave him. And though Sonny resents his father for leaving him, he actually, you know, doesn't prefer anything but that name, Sonny, that was given to him by the father. And that explains his attitude too, when his mother calls him the name Carson and he doesn't respond. He also has 3 daughters with 3 different women, and he's largely absent from their lives, which also indicates that Sonny, who detested his father because his father abandoned him, was finding himself in a space where he was repeating the same cycle because he had children. He was largely absent from their lives, and he was unable to provide for them or be the father that they needed. Now, there's a next part in Sonny's life, which was his escape into jazz and addiction. When he quit his activism, he found a job in a jazz club called Jasmine. There he met a singer called Amani, you know, and the way she moves, her dance, her styles captivated him. And eventually he fell in love with her life, fell in love with her voice, and that reminded him of the beauty of his mother singing in church as well. However, this very beautiful and attractive Amani with a good voice was a heroin addict. So eventually, Sonny, like I said, Amani, who is very beautiful, has a lovely voice, is a heroin addict. And what happens? If you admire someone this beautiful, you love her singing, you work in the same place as her, the tendency is that you tend to behave like her, and that's what happened. Sonny eventually joined her. So in this case, we see him trading his political anger, you know, for something we would refer to as the slum numbness of the needle. And this is by doing drugs. So he stops fighting for a better world and starts fighting just to get the next score in his next hit. So this is how he left from an activist to a drug addict. We've also noticed that throughout the chapter, there is the power, or what we would call the mother's love. Willie, she was a constant force. She's a domestic worker, like they mentioned, who carries her own broom because she said she did not have confidence in the brooms of the white men. So she would take her broom because she believes that that broom would do the work for her. And even when Sonny was in deep addiction, she would always show up to his door to pray for him, invite him for like Sunday dinner, or invite him actually to come get food. She did not give up on her son. And throughout the chapter, you know, there are key themes, you know. We talk about the weight of futility, the feeling that no matter how hard you fight the system, it doesn't budge. That's what Sonny felt. He had written letters. He had protested. He had marched. He had fought with the police. But all of that, going to jail, coming back to the same things that caused him to do that anyway. Second, we're talking about generational cycles. How the trauma of an absent father can repeat itself even when the son hates it. He hated his father because his father was absent. But he in turn became even the same person that he hated in his father. 3 children, 3 daughters from 3 different women. And we also see music as a bridge. You know, we talk about jazz and gospel as 2 sides of the same coin, both seeking a crown, you know, or an escape from hard life. And we see that being used, the gospel, his mother, jazz, him, to be able to solve that. So I think this, in a nutshell, is what that chapter conveys about Sonny. Now I'm going to, let me find my book. So I'll go and talk about the final, just give me a moment. Let's scroll down and read. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to talk about Marjorie. Marjorie, I'm going to start by reading and then I'll share a little about Marjorie as well. Marjorie, excuse me, sister. I take you see Castle, Cape Coast Castle, 5 cedis. You come from America? I take you see slave ship, just 5 cedis. The boy was probably around 10 years old, only a few years younger than Marjorie herself. He had been following her since she and her grandmother's housekeeper got off the trotro. The locals did this, waiting for terrorists to disembark so that they could con them into paying for things Ghanaians knew were free. Marjorie tried to ignore him, but she was hot and tired, still feeling the sweat of the other people who had pressed against her back and chest and sides on the nearly 8-hour trotro ride from Accra. I take you see Cape Coast Castle, sis? Just 5 cedis, he repeated. He wore no shirt, and she could feel the heat radiating off of his skin, coming towards her. After all the traveling, she couldn't stand another strange body so near hers, and so she soon found herself shouting in Twi, I'm from Ghana, stupid, can't you see? The boy didn't stop his English. But you come from America. Angry, she kept walking. Her backpack straps were heavy against her shoulders, and she knew they would leave marks. Marjorie was in Ghana visiting her grandmother, as she did every summer. Some time ago, the woman had moved to Cape Coast to be near the water. In Edwoso, where she had lived before, everyone called her crazy woman. But in Cape Coast, they only knew her as old lady. So old, they said, she could recite the entire history of Ghana from memory lane. Is that my child coming to me? The woman asked. She was leaning on a cane made of curved wood, and her back mimicked that curve, rounding down so that the woman looked like she was in constant supplication. Akwaba, 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 she said. My old lady, I've missed you, Marjorie said. She hugged her grandmother too forcefully, and the woman yelled, Hey, have you come to break me? Sorry, old lady called her houseboy to take Marjorie's bag, and slowly, gingerly, Marjorie pulled the straps of her aching shoulders. Her grandmother saw her wince and asked, Are you hurt? It's nothing. The response was reflex. Whenever her father or grandmother asked about her pain, Marjorie would say she had never known it. As a young child, someone had told her that the scars her father wore on his face and her grandmother on his hands and feet were born of great pain. And because Marjorie had no scars that resembled those, she could never bring herself to complain of pain. Once, when she was just a little girl, she had watched a ringworm on her knee grow and grow and grow. She had hidden it from parents for nearly 2 weeks until the worm overtook the curve where thigh met calf, making it difficult for her to bend. When she had finally shown her parents, her mother had vomited and her father had snatched her in his arms and rushed her to the emergency room. The elderly who came to call them back had been startled not by the worm, but by her father's scars. She had asked if he was the one who needed help. All right, so I think I'll end there for this chapter on Marjorie. And I think one of the most beautiful things that we see is a girl that is divided by two worlds. So she lives a divided life. When you read through that chapter, you see that Marjorie, every summer, travels to Cape Coast, Ghana to visit her grandmother, who is referred to as Old Lady. And in Ghana, she's seen as an American tourist, sorry. So you can see from the little boy, following her and say, do you want 50 cedis? Come I take you to Cape Coast Castle. And even when she shouts, get away, you fool, I'm Ghanaian. The man says, no, but you are from America. So you see a girl divided by two worlds. And in her own hometown of Huntsville, Alabama, she's seen by many people as not being Black enough because she reads Victorian novels and she speaks properly. So here is a lady who, back to her own country, back to Ghana, she's seen as an American. But even in America, because of a certain lifestyle, because of the novels she reads, because of how she talks, again, they don't think that she's Black enough. So you see a girl who is torn between two worlds. And we also see the identity struggle. In Alabama, other Black students call her a white girl. In Ghana, locals try to charge her tourist prices, just like the little boy was doing, because it's free for Ghanaians, but when she gets there, they need to charge her. So she feels like she belongs everywhere, but at the same time, nowhere. Because Black students are calling her white girl, and in her own country back, they're referring to her as a foreigner and treating her in the same way like a foreigner. The next thing we talk about, we see here is the ancestral connection. Marjorie carries the most important symbol in the book, the black stone necklace. This stone has been passed down through 7 generations, starting with Efia, the beauty at Cape Coast Castle. In Ghana, her grandmother takes her to the ocean and teaches her that their ancestors are still there, some free in the sand, some trapped in deep water near the slave castles. The usual African belief that though our ancestors die, they actually are still lingering. And most of the time we want to connect their presence to nature, the earth. And that's why you'd see in some African traditions, you'd see when people want to share palm wine, they'll pour it down, on the ground first. So the earth, the water, and it's the same thing that Marjorie experiences with her grandmother. Also in Marjorie's umbilical cord was buried in the ocean, which is a ritual to ensure that no matter how far she travels, her spirit will always know the way back to Ghana. So does that explain why Marjorie doesn't stay for too long without coming back? That's a question for us to think about. The next thing that we see is the fear of fire. Like her father and grandmother before her, Marjorie has an instinctive and a deep-seated fear of fire. This is a blood memory of fire that her ancestor, Mame, said at the very beginning of the book. Even though Marjorie does not know the full history, the fear lives inside her, making her panic at every sight of even a small cigarette lighter. And then we also have Graham and the pain of high school. Marjorie finds a friend and first love in Graham, who is a white boy that moved to Alabama from Germany. They bond over their shared feelings of being outsiders. In quotes, she's from Ghana, and he from Germany. So they do most of the things that Marjorie loves to do together. They read books together in the library. They share quiet and intellectual romance. However, the reality of Alabama's racism eventually interprets. And we see in a heartbreaking scene in the school cafeteria where a white girl tells Graham that he shouldn't sit there with Marjorie. And Graham, wanting to fit in, eventually stands up and leaves the other girl, leaving Marjorie alone. So you see racism also, which was a great theme that was, or at least something that was shown in that part of the story. And then we talk about the aloneness. The chapter ends with Marjorie dealing with the news that her grandmother is dying. She feels a deep sense of aloneness, feeling that the one person in this world who saw her, understood her story, told her everything that she needs to know, reconnected her to her ancestors, was leaving. So that also made her feel very lonely. And so in terms of, overall key themes, we're talking about the wrong kind of Black, the fact that Marjorie explores how Blackness is defined differently in Africa versus in America. A Black girl who is referred to as white girl, in the Black community in America, but also back in her own hometown is considered a tourist. We also talk about blood memory, the idea that we carry the fears and strengths of ancestors that we never met, the whole issue of fear of fire. And then the ocean versus the castle, the ocean representing the spirit and the way home, while the castle represents the trauma of the past. So maybe a quote that I would share as I end this would be from this chapter is, that I think that we should end with is, I mostly just feel like I don't belong there. As soon as I step off the airplane, people can tell that I'm like them, but different too. They can smell it on me, loneliness, or maybe aloneness, the way I don't fit here or there. Thanks, Anne.
Thank you so much, Ansel, for that. I love how you humanize the whole passage. When you say the Kwaba, I could relate. And guys, I know you have some comments, but please allow me to bring Brenda now that her mic is working.
Sure.
And then
Yes.
after her, we can ask all these things. So do maybe Yolo, take it away. Oh no, I'm gonna cry, I swear. Can you do it without the microphone? Oh, can you do it without the
Turn off your
earphones?
video.
You
She can
have to
turn off
try to remove the headphones, please. Can
phones.
you
Yes.
remove the headphones?
Yes,
Yeah.
remove the headphones and just talk directly. I think it will be better.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can? Okay. There's a lot of background noise, so I don't know if you'll be able to hear me.
We will try.
You will try? Okay, so with this whole confusion, I'm not sure where to start. But I think I'll just go to SC straight. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Okay, good. So while reading this, I discovered that SC is the first child. Completely forgotten the woman's name, but she was born and left to her own devices, and her mother got married to a second man. And through this, it is only through the death of the woman who was taking care of, I'm butchering the names, it was only through the woman who was taking care of the second born child that she was able to find out that she was indeed not Mame's child. So Essie's Ise starts in the dungeon, and she is speaking about what she sees in the dungeon, the horrible smells, and of course the baby that she ended up losing due to the status of the dungeon. So I was trying to pick a specific place to be able to read and bring this to light. I think I will do the first paragraph and then rush through it. I was also supposed to speak on, please give me 1 second. I am also supposed to speak about Ness and Kojo. Now, Ness was moved from Ghana into, I believe this is the United States of America, and she is talking about the difference in life, or at least we're able to see the difference in life between home and what she is experiencing in the plantation. We are able to see and read about the brutality that is going on in this plantations, not only about Kojo, but also for those who are able to read after this about baby H. Now, baby H was cut off from the mother's womb, and the mother was killed, and because he was unable, just like Kojo, who was taken away from his parents who were trying to run away from the plantation. Because of this, we see the effects of this, that they're unable to forge specifically great relationships, with the exception of Kojo, of course, who was able to build this with his wife, Anna, out of something he had no idea, he had no experience with, but again ended up losing his wife due to the brutality of racism and what was going on with regards to the plantations. So I will read the paragraph. Let me reduce this. So the smell was unbearable. In the corner, a woman was crying so hard that it seemed her bones would break from her convulsions. This was what they wanted. The baby messed itself, and the Afua, its mother, had no milk. She was naked, save for the small scrap of fabric the traders had given her to wipe her nipples when they leaked. But then they had miscalculated. No food for the mother meant no food for the baby. The baby would cry soon, but the sound would be absorbed by the mud walls, subsumed into the cries of hundreds of women who surrounded it. So with this first paragraph, we are given the exact situation of what exactly is happening in the dungeon. We are reading about the women who are in the dungeon. We are learning about the kind of smells that are in the dungeon, and of course, the poor hygiene that is, or lack thereof, any hygiene in the dungeon. And this is one of the things that always stands out with regard to any form of colonialism, racism, or in this case, slave trade. One of the things that they always insist on is ensuring that they strip you of your humanity. So even the basic needs of everyday life, you're unable to shower, which increases the risk of getting diseases. And of course, just to ensure that you are alive enough for you to work. We read later on that they're given specific portions of porridge, not to ensure that they have nutrition, but just to ensure that they're barely alive for them to be shipped and in these ships to go to the United States or America. So we are introduced to a woman by the name Tansy, who is being asked by Essie to tell her stories. Now, Essie is talking about Fante village, where Essie was held. Now, one of the things that we realize with regards to this slave trade is, of course, a silent discussion that we never want to have as Africans, and that is the fact that fellow Africans were actually selling each other for a specific price, either getting things, commodities from the white slavers or prestige. And because we're so used to the white part of this story, we never want to come to terms with how we as ourselves continued this, even despite the fact that later on the United States of America had banned the slave trade. So she is talking about the story of the Kente cloth, and she explains to Essie that she had it numerous times before, of course, twice from Tanti herself, but she shook herself because she wanted to listen to the story again and again, at least to be able to get a sense of home. So she is talking about how they were made from, how spiders, when these people who watched it for the first time, they realized that the spider's web is unique, and so they tried to replicate that into the fabric, and which is what brought in the kente cloth. So we see Essie talking about the lady Tansy being a bright storyteller, a fine storyteller, and that she could bring this stories into life. But as of by the time the morning arrives, that Afua had died, you know, and so we are now being brought into the vivid picture of how her body looked like, and they explained that it was purple, it was blue, and it is written in verbatim that Essie knew that she had held her breath until Nyame took her. Now, Nyame is what they consider God, and this is one of the sentences that we in literature, we usually look at these things and then just say like it wasn't normal or the sun was shining. But then there is meaning to that, either foreboding or foreshadowing. And with this, I was asking myself questions about how sometimes the body is not ready to release what the mind or the soul has already realized. And one of the things that, as we read this first few chapters, is that many of these people were taken away from home. And so when they were physically taken away from their homes, they, in the sense, literally left home. So yes, their bodies may have been moving outside their villages to this dungeon, but their souls had already left that place. And so by the time they were getting into this dungeon, their will, their thoughts, about being away from home, being away from their ordinary life, they're so far away from what they're used to that they had just given up. And so we see no sign of Afua being sick. We are at least not told that she was sick or that she was going through something, but that in the morning, she had just died. And in the real life, I think sometimes one of the things I appreciate about this in real life is that death sort of hides, it hides our face, to these things. It is shy and it does not want to be seen. If we may get personal at this point in time, as of yesterday, we got information that we have lost someone very close to us through diabetes. And I say that death is shy. This is because we had spoken to her, just a few hours before, and they were fine. They were laughing, everything was okay. But now that we still have not come to terms with it, but now that we're looking back, we see that the signs were there, that she had already left before she physically left. So when I read about Afua, it is just a reminder that it is always lurking. We don't have the opportunity to see it, which I think is a bit of justice for us, because no one wants to know, when I think the people themselves know, but they never want those around them to know that the time has come. So I found this to be very comforting, that even though, Afua had left, at least she had not given any sign that this was happening. I'm seeing your emojis, but I'm trying as much to ignore them. So part 2 of this is we are now learning about Essie, and Mame and how she came to life. And Mame was a woman, as we see, who really did not like this child that was brought to her to take care of her. And this is a sub-theme that I think we also refuse to talk about as Africans. And this is specifically the mother wound. And the mother, not exactly the woman who gave birth to you, but the mother figure in your life. And we see this being brought out by the fact that Mame did everything in her power to ensure that, I hope I am not confusing the characters, but She did everything in her power to ensure that this young lady, who was supposed to be her daughter, was taken to the white man's castle and married to the white man. The first thing that we see is that she is constantly being reprimanded for every single thing that she does when she was young, which is funny because many of the times, one of the lessons that I was talking about is with regards to calling out our leaders who are doing wrong. And we never see the youth or basically any human being come out and say that the government is wrong, because we have been taught since childhood, with any form of authority, you are not allowed to question them. And we see this with regards to our confidence, which is low, because, for example, if a cup falls, then you have your mother coming in and saying, break all of them. So when you're seeing corruption, you are vilified for breaking a cup. So how are you supposed to talk about corruption? We also see Mame taking away, the first part of her femininity, and this is with regards to periods. Now, all the women in this room and those who are watching, I think we all have our experiences. The first time we realized that we became a woman, it was an embarrassing situation, because many times as women, we rarely have that talk. You're in class. I'm not sure at what stage you were taught about this, but I remember us being taught in class 6, and you have this thing that looks like this, and you're just told this is the fallopian tube. And when an egg comes out and it's not fertilized, the walls break, blood comes out, and then you have your period, and that's class. But then when it happens in real life, you see it and you're like, am I sick? Am I hurt? Is something going on with the body? And then you're just told, these are pads, how you put them on, stay away from men. And then you're now in this age and you're starting to realize, okay, so this is actually a stage in womanhood where, my body is doing these things. I think it is funny when I go on TikTok and people are realizing that the fallopian tubes and the sac, they're not conjoined, that there's a space, and it is actually the fallopian tube that grabs the egg, and the egg has to pass through the fallopian tube and come into the uterus. And people are shocked that that is how the body works. They're like, yeah, that's why you usually have a specific kind of pain before your periods. Anyways, it was funny to see Mame take away this specifically joyous moment with Essie, just to ensure that she has a hold over her and ensure that she gets married to the white man. Not because that she wanted the daughter to be able to get a good life, but she wanted to send away not just the daughter, but the reminders that this is not her child, that she cannot give this girl the love that she needs. Moving forward into this, we realized that Essie's mother also had specific fears with regards to fire. She could not be able to move closer to fire because it reminded her of a specific fire that she had experienced. I think I'm butchering this. I'm seeing the book in real time, but the characters, this woman, she had given birth, and as she was giving birth, there was a huge fire that affected the farmland. And because of this, that woman was cursed. And so we have the daughter coming in and thinking that maybe because of this, that she's carrying the weight or the curses from her ancestors, and she's bringing them to today's life. In modern day, we see that with regards to separating what was, what is, and who you want to be. And I think my main issue with regards to moving on as Africans is that we are never ready to separate what was, what is, and what will be. A very good example is, as we're reading this passage on Essie, is that we never question women. I think that bothers me a lot, that we never really question women because we have accepted our role as victims, In this light, we can see that Mame was really toxic. Yes, maybe her background was toxic, but she brought this to, an innocent child. And two things can be true at the same time. For one, it was unfair. I understand that it was unfair for her to be, to have a daughter thrusted, to her, like, take care of this child. And she probably did not want this child. But then we also need to come to terms with the fact that she did not have the right to bring her pain, to Essie. And so we never really want to be in spaces where people say that, my mother hurt me. I don't like to do these things, or I like to do things this way because of what happened with my mother. And so we see this being brought to the forefront, especially with regards to leadership. A question that I thought of when I was reading this passage is, whenever we say women are encouraged to apply to this specific job, and you get that job, did I get the job as a woman or because I was qualified? That is one of the questions that I'm asking. And then the second question would be, the women that were able to defy all odds and get this job, are they people that we can emulate and see that I want to be like her? And three, when we're in the same space as them, are we willing to go above and beyond to ensure that we maintain these specific spaces? Because for one, we have a current female president. What would she be someone we want to emulate? And to the women in her circle, are they women you want to emulate outside the office? Are you willing to deal with your toxicity to be able to get there? But then if you deal with it, it also means that you will be put away from your fellow women, because then again, no, everyone will want to deal, with what they had experienced, because change requires you to look at yourself and see something is wrong and I want to change it. And many people do not want to do that, which led me to Kojo. Kojo's parents were in the plantation, and it gave me excitement to see that there was joy, in this specific small family at hand. Kojo's mother is Ghanaian, Kojo's father is Nigerian, and we only hear a glimpse of it when they tell us that he speaks in Yoruba, and I'm looking at it from the point of view that you're having two people who were brought away from their countries, from their norms, and brought into a new country completely different from what they are used to. But they're able to create this specific environment where they enjoy their love. And with this love, we're able to have Kojo. But then because they want to run away and give Kojo a better life, they have to do something out of the norm, which is running away from the plantation. And so I asked myself, like, how many of us were in the plantation and how many of us are willing to risk and move out of the plantation? Many of us, I think, are comfortable being in the plantation because we are able to get the nitty-gritties of life. Maybe you have a car, you have food and whatnot. And so Kojo's parents, to some extent, showed that. But then the move out of the plantation required them to be brave enough to be able to go to outside what they used to, into an unfamiliar land. Unfortunately, they were not able to succeed. They were brought back into the plantation. We have Kojo's mom, who was beaten fiercely, and Kojo's father, who, with brutal explanation, we see that he was hanged, and he did not survive. So Kojo, out of this, with no recollection of what family life is or what love is, he is able to work on himself and bring in his new family. And we are explained too that he takes care of this family up until they were able to get their final child, who is H, and to which this new law that was passed, that there was a probability that Kojo would be seen as a runaway slave, and he had to move out of the place they were staying, and he was advised to move up north, up till Canada, and his wife and kids were safe. But then we see that his wife was abducted and she died just before giving birth to H. And so H was cut out of his mother's womb and to be able to brought into life. So we're having two men who are carrying mother wounds and who are unable to experience what family life is. But then there's a stark difference between Kojo and his son H, because with Kojo, he had accepted that he had no background, but he's going to create a loving background. But yet his son H, who did not have the privilege of knowing who his parents are, becoming this arrogant man who has an opportunity to be with the woman that he loves. And so he writes a letter to her to ask for a second chance. And where I stopped reading, they are now living together and trying to work things out together to be able to create a new life together. One of the constant things as I finish is the theme of trauma and how trauma is being passed from generation to generation. One of the big questions that I'm hoping to answer this year is, how do we measure trauma in law? Because it is very easy for us to, the pronouncement by Ghana that, we need to look at reparations in a different light, and we need to be able to, be paid back for everything that, had happened generations before us. But how do I quantify that? In legal status, and two, what happens when you find out that you're from a lineage of slave traders, and of course number three, who exactly is going to benefit from this reparations? Because again, when we talk about trauma, we are seeing in this book that there are characters that are willing to go above and beyond to ensure that as a fellow Black or African person, you do not get to enjoy life. So if we were to bring this home going into today's status, and maybe the white people say that we'll start by educating you, how many people will be able to get scholarships? How many people will know that their names have been approved for scholarships? How many youth will be able to get into school? Because of this, we'll be able to see, for example, a rise in murders, because maybe people are not comfortable that you were chosen to go to school and someone else was not chosen. So those are the things, those are the questions I was asking myself with regards to trauma. I think I will stop there before I confuse any more characters. But I read the book and I'm here to discuss it.
Oh my gosh, I thank you so much. Congratulations for that. I'm congratulating you for making it, because we really tried to get you. But just to pick up from where you left in terms of being able to quantify reparation in law, yesterday we did talk about two things that I wrote here in my other meeting. That was legal resistance and reparation, and state reparation, and cultural reparation, to be able to classify these reparations. But I'm not gonna continue to talk. I would want to seek consensus from all of us. I know we were supposed to finish by 7:30, but now we are at 6. Is it okay if we finish at 6:30, please, so that we allow for your reflections and I bring in Zamdina, and we don't do the breakout rooms for the interest of time, and then we reflect together? Can I have consensus by reactions? Yeah, that's one person, 2 people, 3. Okay. 4. What is the threshold for? Oh, yeah. We would definitely involve you. Please, Kimani, put and Eunice, put our emails on the chat for Sherry. Yeah, but allow me to bring in Zamdina, who is going to help us reflect about this session, and 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 then I think we will end after the reflections. And Sherry, yes, there is a WhatsApp group on reparations. It's called the Africans Rising Reparation Action Group, and so you'll be able to be added. So don't worry, we are putting our emails there, and you can email us and just remind us you're part of this meeting, and we'll be happy to put you, either me, Kimani, Eunice. Yeah, Zemdina, you can come in and help us reflect these sessions.
Thank you, Anne. Can you hear me?
Oh yes, my love, I can hear you.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm just quickly going to put my camera on for a minute so that you can see me. My name is Zinduna Abebe. I'm from Ethiopia. I'm a Pan-African feminist. I've been working within the feminist movement for quite some time now. I would like to start by telling you what my name means and greeting you in my language, in one of the languages spoken in Ethiopia, Amharic. Salam እንዴት ናችሁ? ጤና ይስጥልኝ, because we are also honoring African Languages Weekend. It's important to recognize our languages. Also, my name is Ndina. It means kinship in Amharic. And I think when we talk about the book, we're also going to talk about kinship and how kinship was disrupted. So I'm just going to quickly turn off my camera just so that the connection is stable and just dive into the conversation. So essentially, my part is an attempt to frame our conversation within feminist theory, feminist analysis, and just interrogating the different characters from that lens. That being said, Homegoing traces, like you've been saying, the descendants of two half-sisters in the 18th century Ghana. One is married to a British slave trader, and another one is sold into slavery. So the structure itself, we can say, is reparative in the sense that, first and foremost, it restores fragmented histories. It also connects Africa to the diaspora. We all know that the descendants of African people were violently, taken from the continent through slavery. So through the story, there's an attempt to connect brothers and sisters and people from the continent itself. It also humanizes those reduced to statistics, because when we hear about the transatlantic slave trade, it's usually numbers. People are always reduced to numbers, as if they're not full human beings with souls and dignity. And that particularly happens with African bodies and Black people. It also interrogates intergenerational trauma, and it makes it visible. Like we've said, in Africa, not only were our resources extracted, but our souls were also extracted, and they continue to be extracted. So positioning, that narrative, the fact that it situates the stories in a way that shows the generational trauma and the intergenerational trauma that continues is also quite important, because for feminists, reparations are not only financial. Storytelling, memory, or as Toni Morrison says, rememory, and historical truth are forms of repair. And also often during the transatlantic conversation and the overall conversation on reparations, women and marginalized groups are an afterthought, and they're not central to the conversation, because the very foundation of slavery is gendered. And oftentimes that's completely sidelined and disregarded, because women's bodies were sites of sexual violence. They were also instruments of economic exploitation. And we also see this textbook performance even today happening by our own governments, where conflict-prone areas, women's bodies are used as sites of violence. So the racial categorization and the sexual and reproductive coercion that the characters were confronted in is important, because the transatlantic slave trade was not only racial capitalism, it was also gendered racial capitalism. I think, again, the gendered element and how capitalism, race, gender intersect is also important. So we have to analyze this from an intersectional lens, and I think the book does an excellent job of showing us that. Again, intergenerational trauma through, women's bodies. Like we carry, for example, as an Ethiopian, colonialism is not something the country was confronted in, or also like Anna was saying earlier, we didn't go through slavery as us, as Zindana, as Anne, but we carry a lot of Black pain. And that's why it's triggering for us when we go to, so-called museums where we see, Black bodies and Black women's bodies. I mean, the terror that happened, and we really feel it in our bones to this day. And that's why when we read this book, it's triggering for us, because we cannot separate, our ancestral heritage, whether we admit it or not. Especially given the fact that it continues to happen, given the fact that white supremacy has not shown remorse. For me, I'm personally shocked when I go to, different museums and historical places and see white people, and they just go there as, a place where you go to chill. Like, I mean, even in their face, like in the way they relate to the place, I still personally find it triggering, and I think it's a lot for a lot of us. So I think it's important to acknowledge that. And also the fact that, Gayasi chose archiving instead of silence is a political act, because our suffering, our resistance is oftentimes erased. So this, acknowledgement, like the fact that it's written, although this is like more of fiction, but it was based on historical facts. So what that does is it's a political way to say and to document what happened, because like we said, it's continuing. The unfortunate truth is that we're living in a global system of oppression where colonization, imperialism is continuing to happen. And then again, for feminists, the complexity of, the slave trade. It's also in her story, women were not portrayed as passive victims, right? Oftentimes, because we're talking about systemic and structural violence, women are oftentimes portrayed as just mere, subjects to the stories and not as central to this conversations. And I think when we talk about reparative justice, we must grapple with the layered, her stories, and not just the binary blame and just situate women as, things like objectifying women again. I mean, these women, these characters, they're fooled in their experiences, and that humanizing that was attempted through the book becomes central. But again, in the African mythology, we've also talked about, also for feminists, fire is important. Yes, fire, on the surface represents destruction, but also fire is memory. Sometimes within the feminist space, we ask women to write, stories of their most traumatic experiences, and we ask them to burn it. So we collectively, it's a burning ritual that we do. So, I mean, fire has been symbolic within our movements. Again, motherhood, or how motherhood is, marked in the stories, and the maternal bonds, and the gendered harm. For example, I can talk about recently in Ethiopia, we're going through conflict, and when X ethnic group is fighting with Y, what they do is to sort of punish, the enemy. They use women's bodies to sort of, demoralize and sort of attack, or it's women's bodies are weaponizing. So the same thing was used during that era, and I think it's important for us also to remember that. So what the book does for me is it's an acknowledgement. It's a full historical truth telling. I think oftentimes the truth is, this becomes subjective. The truth is dependent on who tells it. But in this story, there's an element of truth telling. It also addresses wealth extraction through slavery. I think it also calls for, at least in the way I see it, psychosocial healing, because reparations, you cannot, just because you return something you took from me, it's not going to repair the damage. That's psychosocial healing, the perpetual mental breakdown that particularly women are confronted, African women, Black women of the diaspora are confronted with, is through carrying pains. I mean, I personally feel like I'm carrying my grandmother's and my mother's pain. Sometimes I look at myself and I look at my back, and I see it in me, and I think it's a lot. I mean, there are a lot of similarities for a lot of us. We carry the burden. I actually call it my mother's burden, so a lot of us carry our ancestral burden. So I think that acknowledgement is important for our psychosocial healing from a feminist, standpoint. It also, I think I would also, the cultural restoration, reclaiming language, memory, lineage. When I say my name is Zindana, and the fact that it's not a European name is telling me of, how the sacrifices my maternal, ancestors paid for me. Sometimes, even those we've met, and those I've met my grandma from my dad's side. I haven't met my grandmother from my mom's side, but my mom always tells me the fire, the feminist, like this radical wish to always look for justice. She says she sees it, she's seen it in her mother, and I carry that. But I've never even met, my grandmother. So I think it's also important, to center ourselves and the way we are from our ancestors. And I don't remember who, but somebody was saying they gave up religion so that they can connect to their roots. And one of the ways a culture, a people, an identity can be destroyed is by destroying a people's culture, a people's language, a people's identity. And I think Homeboing really, really talks about that. I mean, in terms of situating it to the actual characters in the story, I would briefly like to talk about AC and the sexual violence, that happened. AC was imprisoned in Cape Coast. She was raped by a British soldier. So her body became a site of imperial control. And even, there was a movement in Kenya, my body, my choice. Her body wasn't hers. Our bodies are just like our resources. I'm talking about our material resources. Our bodies were also occupied or captured by that violent system. And then also, it's important to also unpack that sexual violence is not incidental. It's systemic, it's intentional, it's on purpose. Like I said, it's done deliberately. And the experience of AC articulates that. So reparations must also include recognition of sexual violence as foundational to slavery and not a side thing, a side note. It was part and parcel of the way the system was designed, and to use women's bodies as part of that empire making. So even before, cottons were picked, Essie's body carried the cost of empire. So I think that the book did a great job of showing us that. Another character worth mentioning is Ness. Ness is enslaved on a plantation, and she attempted to escape while her son was sold away as punishment, right? So again, for a feminist, this motherhood is weaponized against her. And it continues to happen even to this day. Mothers are punished for being mothers. through that, whether or not that motherhood happened through rape, like regardless of how that's happened. So we live in a system that continues to punish women, and their children. Their children were also economic assets, and they were also property. So women, even they don't even have a say, or like, I mean, of course, children are nobody's property, even their mothers, but also to sort of, disjoint a child from a mother, that's again, a pain on top of pain. So reproduction sustained the slave economy after the transatlantic slavery slowed. So the reparative implication for this would be reparations must account for stolen kinship and forced reproductive labor. Because the kinship was stolen. You have a lot of people that are in crisis because they don't know who they are. Their identity is lost. So when we talk about reparations, how do you reclaim your identity? I think redefining one's identity, especially as women, as Black people, is important. For us, when we say we're Pan-African feminists, it's a reclaiming of an identity. So through this book, we also come to terms with reclaiming our identity. When we say we are Africans, we want a borderless Africa. When we say Africans rising, that is, we're positioning ourselves somewhere, and it's deliberate, it's on purpose. Again, Afia is another character who marries a British slave trader, and she benefits from the systems that destroys us. I think the speaker before me was talking about, for example, we want women to occupy powerful spaces of power, but we oftentimes find the same women perpetuating the same cycles of violence. So what happens when we ourselves become active participants of the violent system we are, denouncing politically? So again, this book, speaks to that. Again, when we talk about reparations, and the African Union has, claimed to take this on. However, we know that the African Union is a bystander or silent when violence happens in our own, or in its own member states and in our countries. So the discourse must grapple with the layered responsibilities or survival and the choices within how this constrained systems oppress us. Again, I think there was a lot that was said about intergenerational trauma. And I think, like I said, we, even as individuals, as communities, we embody and inherit a lot of trauma. Sometimes we don't even have a name to call this anger, this rage. So that's why it becomes very important in the whole reparative movement to call for, our psychosocial and holistic healing, because without that, it just becomes tokenism. Financial compensation is not going to do it for us. Again, just to speak about the diasporic return and, the identity repair. Marjorie migrates from Ghana to the US, right? So again, migration continues colonial displacement. Again, I was actually thinking of the Borderless Africa movement and how movement, or the freedom of movement is again part and parcel of the conversation on reparation, the conversation on the justice we as African people, African women are calling for. Again, cultural restoration. I think I wrote an article on how we consider our languages as inferior. A lot of times people who speak English or who have an accent or who speak French are favored, are considered smart, are considered in that hierarchy of power. They are up there, right? So how do we claim our cultures and our way of being as enough, because there's a lot of knowledge within the African system. So this book again invites us to have this important conversations, right? Again, our connections to our ancestors being important. And I know there are a lot of spirituality movements who are also claiming to sort of, decrease the gap. And a lot of young people are going back to that. And somebody was actually telling me the reason a lot of people are having mental breakdown, young people, women, is also because of that disruption, disconnection from our ancestral lineage and connection. So just like to close this off, I know we're running out of time, so I wanted to say a lot, but I'll keep it short. Sexual violence is, again, it was the foundation of the slave trade, so we cannot ignore reparative justice from this conversation. Anne, I see your camera is up, so I'll give it back to you just to give also the people on the panel time to reflect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zamdina, for that contextualization and for reaffirming the fact that, female Black bodies have been used as extractives from reproduction to being on the low periphery of the value chains, even in the economics and even in the land ownership systems. I mean, there's so many things you could attach to it, but I didn't want to belabor on what you said. I would definitely want to bring this to a close, but then before I do that, it would be unfair for people who sat all along and listened to us if I don't give one or two people a chance. If one person wants to say something in a minute, then I'm going to give it to them. And don't worry if you did not get a chance to speak. There is a community that you can join, and this webinar was recorded, so it's on Facebook. And please, we send you as messenger to the people who wanted to join past 5 p.m. The link could no longer accept them, and they kept reaching out, and I kept asking Maurice to help, and Maurice kept saying it's already closed. Is there anyone who would like to say something? Nkamisa? Valerie, anybody? Shamsia, oh, I hope it's the Shamsia I know. Good to see you. Anybody who has something to say from the panelists as well, if you have something. Fortunately, I might not be able to give you back the microphone because I want to be very truthful and finish this at exactly 6:30. Do we have a reflection? Okay, good. Go ahead, Abungile. Great. I think okay. Can you speak? Do I need to send you? I think there's Abungile's hand up. How do I, Maurice, it's muted. Allow you to talk. Good. I gave you the microphone, then Angela, then let's wrap up.
Hi, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Also, this is my first time attending these conversations, and I have been delighted to listen to the the three previous speakers, and the reading was phenomenal. So thank you so much for that. I am Abongile from South Africa, really interested in the question of reparations. I'm currently doing work around that, but more in a legal context and focusing on the role of corporations and multinational companies for their operations in Africa, but precisely more focused on South Africa, right? So when I saw the poster and an opportunity to sign up for this conversation, I was particularly drawn between two things: the book itself, but also on the question of reparations. In as much as I did these two things separately, I was fascinated by the idea of how a conversation around reparations could be extracted from the writing of Ya. And it's been amazing. Such an important question. And I guess I want to I was thinking about something the second speaker said. I do apologize for forgetting the names. I tend to forget names quite a lot, on how we might quantify emotional harm or emotional damage for reparations in law. And, I'm really drawn to that question because I think of my training instinctively. I just want to have an answer or possibly explore ways in which we could have answers. And I think, it's where the moral argument itself meets different legal architectures. When we talk about quantifying emotional harm in reparations, especially in the context of the transatlantic slave trade and, its various forms of harm that have occurred, the law might have a way, and this is a question I've debated and explored with friends, colleagues alike very extensively. But I think what would be difficult, or rather what we would need to build expertise on, is how to translate historical, intergenerational, psychic injury into something more consignable. I don't have the answers yet, but there might be a way. And I think I'll continue joining these conversations to see if we could potentially devise those ways and not losing, the radicalness of quantifying what emotional distress, what losing dignity, psychological trauma, the pain and suffering from that means for the African people, particularly the transatlantic slavery period. I do apologize for saying this and taking too long. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Abungile. And based on your last point, yesterday, a sister from, I think, South Africa also, Petronilla, if you could remember her name and put it on the chat box, she did say something about the need to historicize, but not just historicizing, but getting the correct time. She said, we often talk about the 1845 and the Berlin Conference, but we need to start from 1444. And we were just there and we were thinking, wow. And she also talked about the same thing you've talked about. So we are still reflecting on that. But I welcome you to join our Reparation Action Group, and we will explore more solutions. Hopefully we can get them from our sisters. And I think the beauty of this action group is that we all bring our experiences from, even though we might all be doing reparations, but other people will be doing it from a point of multi-cooperations like you're doing. Others are going to do things like, revamping the whole global financial architecture and the tax system for Africans. Others are looking at cultural aspects. Others are looking at spiritual aspects like Eunice. Others want to document through communication like myself, because I think I collect artifacts and all that. So I welcome you to join the group. Angela, if you could use 1 minute, then I'll be grateful. Then I'm gonna end this call so that I'm not a politician.
Okay. Hi, Anne. Did you give me the mic?
Oh, yes, I did.
Great. I've been meaning to run away from the call, but I've been failing because of the richness of the conversation. I would like to most importantly acknowledge the speakers and the readers for bringing to light this book that some of us have not read. And, as I was listening, I was just able to see, for me, what just came out is, how trauma, intergenerational trauma has been moving through mothers, daughters, and shaping identities. It's been enshrined in shame, in silence, and a lot of survival strategies. So as everyone was speaking, I was just recalling and just thinking of how, reparative justice should, most importantly, we need to keep pushing that it continues to include women-specific traumas and voices. I was just so moved at Marjorie's story and how these women went through these survival strategies. And overall, after hearing everyone, and I believe most people have said this, for me, I honestly, strongly now more than ever believe that for us to truly have reparative justice that is inclusive of women, we really need to focus on reclaiming our memory, and naming gendered harm for what it is, and restoring the narrative of, power to descendants like Marjorie, whose identities were shaped by both violence and survival. So really, I'm so thankful for this opportunity, and I look forward to having more conversations and seeing how we could, shape these discussions and this narrative to ensure that reparative justice is not just something that is focusing on the financial aspect, but looking at the lived realities of women and the harms that they faced and how they still come and that we still see them even in this generation. Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Angie, for that. And I just did want to say that there's some amazing work that we've done at Africans Rising with the university in Brazil. And it also talks about epistemological justice in terms of reparations. And also there's a compendium that was done. I mean, if Eunice Okimani can put it on the chat for those people who would like to carry that home. And if the stories of our siblings in the diasporas that they entrusted us with to share with the rest of the world, for them to know the kind of challenges they go through every day. Because as much as we are speaking, and I like when Ansel said, when the girl goes to Ghana, she's not seen as Ghanaian. I mean, that duality when it comes to Africa, and then is part of what we've documented in the compendium. Because as Africans, then we need to build a common narrative and build a case for the reparations collectively, not diaspora alone, Africa alone, CARICOM alone, Americas alone. We shall never win this fight if we're going to work in silos. But also allow me to then say a big thank you, first of all, Nashe and Kai and Cecia Bonga, Asante, in all the languages that I could possibly say. To all the participants who joined in today, and to our amazing readers and panelists, Miss Farida Tialato, Miss Angela, Brenda, Ansel Langwa, and to my team, the campaign and advocacy, to the larger Africans Rising team who's here, Annette, everybody else, I see you. Thank you so much for making it to this. I don't know, Maurice, if you'll allow us, I know we are late, but I always like ending the webinars with a photo, because photos is part of memorizing, and that's what we are trying to do. So if we could open our camera for the photos, then we will be able to take a group photo, and we can call this a day. And allow me to apologize to Petronila and Angela, who were supposed to lead us in the breakout room, but it was impossible because of the time. And also apologize for those who couldn't join because the rooms were closed. We do hope to do another session like this. Once again, thank you so much. God bless you. And let's do Maurice, are the others going to be able to do, is it possible to also those who are not panelists, for them to be in the video?
Not for attendees, but maybe try to bring them to the panelist.
Please bring them. Yes, please, Valerie, Shamsia, and Seth, Annette, Al-Hassanu, and Abungile, wait to be so that we can all be in this
It's
photo.
so dark. Some of us look like the darkness outside.
No, what we care for is the photo at this point. And I really want them to be brought in, because they're the last people standing on this webinar. I know some people already went home. Abongile, good to see you.